John Boehner,
President's
the
tax increase
Speaker of the
would be
House,
another
is
crippling blow
speaking out
for them
now
while doing
about the fiscal
little
cliff.
to
Let's
nothing
listen
to
in.
solve the bigger problem here, which is our national deficit and our national debt. This debt doesn't exist because we don't tax small businesses enough. It exists because Washington continues to spend too much. And raising taxes on small businesses instead of taking a balanced approach that also cuts spending is wrong. It's only going to make it harder for our economy to grow. And if our economy doesn't grow, Americans don't get new jobs. And the debt problem that we have will continue to threaten our children's future. As I said the day after the election, Republicans are not seeking to impose our will on the president. We're seeking a bipartisan solution that can pass both chambers of Congress and be signed into law by the president in the coming days. Now, during the campaign, the president pledged to the American people that he would seek a balanced approach to addressing the debt, a combination of new revenues and spending cuts. So the day after the election, I said the Republican majority would accept new revenue as part of a balanced approach that includes real spending cuts and reforms. Now, the White House took 3 weeks to respond with any kind of a proposal, and much to my disappointment, it wasn't a serious one. Still, I'm willing to move forward in good faith. Our original framework still stands. Instead of raising tax rates, we can produce similar amount of revenue, reforming the tax code to close loopholes and lower tax rates. That's far better for the economy, and the American people actually favor that approach by 2 to 1. They favor it even more when we can also show them that real spending cuts will, in fact, reduce the deficit. Now, there have been many conversations over the last couple of years that could inform a solution. And I hope the president will draw from those discussions and work with both parties to find common ground. Solving the fiscal cliff in a manner that addresses the true drivers of our debt and saves American jobs will be a great way for the president to start his second term. And for the good of our country and my colleagues, we're ready to work with the president to achieve those goals.
Mr. Speaker, a couple of things. First, on the issue of tax rates, are you willing to accept no deal that includes some increase in those top tax rates? And I'm also wondering what our final deadline on this is. I mean, how much longer can this back and forth? When do we really have to have a deal or a framework for a deal?
Increasing tax rates draws money away from our economy that needs to be invested in our economy to put the American people back to work. It's the wrong approach. We're willing to put revenues on the table, but revenues that come from closing loopholes, getting rid of special interest deductions, and not raising rates. We think it's better for the economy, pure and simple. And secondly, the American people expect us to find common ground, to work together, and to resolve this. And frankly, sooner is better than later.
You've been doing this for a long time. You've had many high-profile negotiations that you've ended successfully. Can you just be candid here about where we are right now? For the past 24 hours, is this the necessary public posturing that needs to go on to get an endgame, or is there serious stalemate right now?
No, there's a stalemate. Let's not kid ourselves. I'm not trying to make this more difficult. If you've watched me over the last 3 weeks, I've been very guarded in what I had to say, because I don't want to make it harder for me or the president or members of both parties to be able to find common ground. But when I come out the day after the election and make it clear that Republicans will put revenue on the table, I took a great risk. And then the White House spends 3 weeks trying to develop a proposal, and they send one up here that calls for $1.6 trillion in new taxes, calls for a little, not even $400 billion in cuts, and they want to have this extra spending that's actually greater than the amount they're willing to cut. I mean, it was not a serious proposal, and so right now we're almost nowhere.
When do you expect to speak to the president again? Are there any meetings scheduled between you and the president?
So there, a lot of ideas have been put on the table. We've had conversations, and I'm sure we'll continue to have conversations.
Do you think that the White House is trying to squeeze you? And if so, does that work?
Listen, most of you know me pretty well. What you see is what you get. And while I may be affable and someone that can work with members of both parties, which I've demonstrated over the 22 years that I've been here, I'm also rather determined to solve our spending problem and to solve this looming debt crisis that is about to consume us.
So what is it that Republicans want exactly on entitlement reform? You keep saying the president needs to show the Democrats' hand on this. What do you want to do in terms of Medicare and how quickly do you want to implement?
Well, you can look at our budget from the last 2 years, and there are plenty of specific proposals, most of which were part of the conversation that the president and I had 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. There have been discussions about many of those same issues this time. So there's a lot from the conversations that we've had to inform almost anybody the kind of proposals that we're looking for.
But even the Paul Ryan plan on Medicare doesn't really take effect for years down the road. You want something more immediate?
I think the debt crisis that we face requires us to make serious decisions, and it requires us to make those decisions now. Thank you all.
Boehner, the Speaker of the House, blasting President Obama's proposals to solve the fiscal cliff crisis, saying that the president wants to impose $1.6 trillion in new taxes and only about $400 billion in cuts. As you heard, the Speaker says that Republicans are open to new revenues. They would like to achieve it by closing tax loopholes. That does not seem to be the way the direction is headed, and not a very optimistic assessment there of things from the Speaker of the House.